Israel does not recognize the existence of Palestine. They claim the entire land to be the land of Israel.
743 children dead, right? Adults is yet unconfirmed, but it is 2000 and above.
Every Israeli citizen is a trained combatant, whether in active service or not. Either you can use the term active combatant or an ex-combatant. You cannot say he is a civilian.
Islam isn't in itself, be that pro-Islam, be that Islamophobia, it is a bigger business model. It is a bigger business model which has been propagated to the wider audience by the Western media. And it is profitable.
I don't know, man. This is absolutely pathetic. The media's unbiasedness is gone.
Forget what is being covered. The way the information is being produced in the newsroom, that is where the brilliance or that is where the magic happens.
Social media has become the gateway through which we consume news. A lot of the stuff that we get to see depends on their filters and algorithms.
Welcome to DYNT News. Today we are discussing the Israel-Palestine issue. And as of now, 6 lakh Palestinians have been displaced from northern Gaza. And we are hearing reports that Israel is bombing Palestinians from the air. And there are mass casualties. At least more than 33 to 45 children have died. And recently, I think 12 hours back, we are seeing evidences of child Palestinians that have been beheaded by Israeli soldiers. So instead of wasting time, I welcome Debraya and Bodhisatta Maiti. Debraya is someone who works in the IT sector and is a left-centric person and an activist. And Bodhisatta Maiti is senior associate editor of Indian Express. He has been our podcast a long time, so viewers would be familiar with his political moorings. So, DYNT News, democratize your nation today, and our tagline, awaken one human at a time. Please like, share, and subscribe. First and foremost, let's go to Debraya, then we'll go to Maiti. Debraya, opening comments.
Opening comment is that I unequivocally condemn this what is going on in Palestine and Gaza, and whatever Israel is doing with the excuse of being like attacked. Their main excuse stands on the leg that their innocents have been attacked by the Hamas group and they have suffered casualties. Hostages have been taken, but what they are actually doing, they are doing the same thing to the Palestinians, the unarmed civilians, the children, the old people of Palestine in a much larger scale. And this time they are getting complete impunity from the West.
Okay. So, Maitida, you have been on our Bangla podcast and we discussed the problematic issue with Hamas. And now it has been proved that Hamas hasn't killed any babies of sorts. And we don't see any cross human rights abuse that Hamas has been marketed as doing. What do you think about these latest developments that has happened in the last 4 or 5 days?
Yeah, so first things first, till 12 hours ago, the body count from Gaza that could be confirmed by international agencies was and the technique that they are using is that Israel is using is very familiar, but which is bombing. But there is an element which harks back to 1948, the al-Nakba, where the Israeli militias would get into various Palestinian villages who had no clue that there was an invasion going on, and they would kill about 30-40% of all the people in that village, including mass rape, gang rape, whatnot, and then let the others flee deliberately. So when they would do that, they would run to the neighboring villages to tell them that there is an invasion coming. And so all these people would run away from those villages. And once they ran away, then the Israelis moved in and occupied and said, we are squatting, you can get lost. So before the aerial invasion started of Gaza this time, they made an announcement that we are going, are saying that the northern 1.2 kilometer or whatever range of Gaza, we are going to flatten it, so you get out of it. Already before that, they had first targeted uh, Gaza's most upmarket neighborhood, Al Rinal, and completely flattened it. And there is a reason behind it. The reason is that uh, it was a eyesore for Israelis to see that even after all that they have done to degrade the Palestinians, there were at least some people who were living a relatively middle class life. How dare they, do that? Why aren't they dying? And if they are not dying, why aren't they living in temporary squatter colonies? How could they be living in apartments which compare to Israeli apartments? Right. So that was the thing. So they destroyed Al Rinal, and then they said the first top 1 kilometer or whatnot, they are going to flatten. So you should move out. Now, after an initial stage on the first couple of days, when quite a few Gazans, just out of fear, they tried to run to the only other possible exit point in Gaza, which is the Al Rafah border with Egypt. What they found is that every time a group of Palestinians, 500, 600, up to 1,000, would gather at Al Rafah, which normally remains closed by Egyptians, and now they were already, Egyptians had already been told by the Israelis not to open, which they often don't listen to, but it takes time to process. So they had gathered there, and as soon as they would gather, an Israeli plane would come in and drop bombs on the gathered refugees. So, it is an old strategy of theirs. They have done it, several times in the past, and even this time they did it at least 3 times confirmed that they have bombed on Al Rafah to on refugees fleeing from North Gaza. So now what has happened is Hamas and Palestinian Authority both have through radio broadcast announced that no one should leave from their homes, because if you leave, they are going to take away that land. Whatever you leave, you have to keep in mind that the Gaza that we see now is about 30% of the Gaza that was there in 1948, right?
Mm,
Because
mm.
most of what used to be Gaza has now been converted into a no man's land between Hamas controlled Gaza and
Mm.
Israel.
So, Maitida, we are discussing the media angle here, and you work with the media. How do you understand this modus operandi that the Indian media and the Israeli media are using? The Indian media demonizes the minorities and the other communities, linguistic communities. Similarly, the Israelis are using the same thing. Did the Israelis learn from India, or India learn from Israelis? What is the bridge here?
Well, in terms of who learned from whom, so Israel has been a model for right wing states, and Israel itself has built itself up, its self image up as a model for right wing dictatorial states across the globe for decades in many different ways. But that I before coming to that, I just want to point out that Indian media, insofar as in particular foreign news is concerned, has always appropriated blindly material from the Anglo-American Western media. So they have always reflected the mood of the Anglo-American Western media into an Indian context without any filter. Right now, only a small part of it is because of funds, right? Uh, Obviously, uh, even in the days of media recession, where even the big foreign companies, they too have started downsizing, taking down the number of correspondents and centers they have in different countries. For example, even in India, even then, uh, uh, problem with Indian media now is that up to the 80s, what you would have is that while they had even less money, they would, because the government was of a different order, they would promote a type of media person to cover foreign affairs who would kind of uphold the government narrative, but in doing so would also take it in a broader context. So if the government was uh, broadly taking a non-aligned position, as it was at that time, it was part of the and one of the founders of the non-aligned movement. So the media had the lassitude to go, different people to go and voice some of the opinions of the you know peoples of the non-aligned movement countries, just to give you an idea. So you could have a South African under the apartheid Africa, under the apartheid regime. The voice of the South African reflected in Indian media occasionally. But
Mm,
now we are in a different ecosphere where
mm,
the Indian government's position has been changing for a very long time. It's 30, 40 years that it has changed, kept on changing. And the media also simultaneously has been given a kind of, especially with the advent of privatized TV, and that is the biggest disruptor here, is that just go ahead and promote a narrative which suits your business model, right? We are not going to interfere. That used to be up
okay.
to another 10 years ago. Now, of course, you have a government that actively pushes the media to toe their line, and you
Mm,
have people being promoted to do exactly that. So
mm.
what more do you expect?
Okay, so like Debraya also works, with the media, and he handles media for one political party also at times. So I want to, bring in Debraya here. Please, if you can unmute yourself. My question to you is like, the media management that we are seeing, especially in India and Bengali media also, they are discussing something which is happening like 3,000, 4,000 kilometers away, and they are inviting people to talk about that. At the same time, there are other issues, pressing issues in Manipur, but we are not seeing that being covered. What is your take on that?
No, I will say that most of the media, like Bodhi said, it is absolutely polarized these days. These media are like parroting the views of the government and like targeting. Like very recently, that I saw to my surprise that in Aishomoy, Times of India Group publication, when one PIL about the Mathura Idgah has been squashed, it has been thrown out by the court. the headline that they came up with, that this is a big setback for the Hindu side. Now they are portraying whatever BJP is doing or whatever this Sanghi environment is doing to the people as the Hindu side. They have become the legitimate franchisee of the entire Hindu population and the entire all sections of Hindus. And their activities, their political stances are being shown in the media, which is supposed to be neutral, which is supposed to be a big pillar of our democracy, um, as the Hindu side. I don't know, man. This is absolutely pathetic. The media's unbiasedness is gone, and the governments these days, both at the center and in the state, they are pressurizing these media to toe their lines, and they are withholding funds, creating obstacles, doing raids, as we saw in the NewsClick case. Anyone who is trying to differ or bring a more objective reporting in their channel or in their portal or in their whatever or print, they are being hounded. It has happened on News Laundry. It has happened with The Wire. It is now happening with NewsClick, and the list goes on and on and on. So either out of fear or out of greed, the media is bowing to the pressures of the incumbent regimes, both in the state and in the center.
Okay, I would like to bring Arjun Mukherjee here. Arjun Mukherjee works with media. Arjun Mukherjee lectures on media in West Bengal University, and he has students, and he has done his PhD also on media. So Arjun, doing a PhD in media. So Arjun, my question to you is that Major Gaurav Arya said something like India has supported Israel in 1971, and another comment he has made that India supported India got Israeli support in Kargil war also, and that is why they won. But we all know that this is actually wrong. It was USSR, and then India won against Pakistan on itself. Still, this bromance that you are seeing between Zionism and Hindutva through someone like Major Gaurav Arya. How, what is your comment on this culture that you are seeing?
See, I mean, to address first things first, Major Gaurav Arya is not worth of intellectual time or effort, at least in my opinion. But since he has said this, and the times that we live in are also the times of information overload. We all like to be overloaded with information because that makes us feel we know a lot, we know more. And you can see this in the amount of social media that we consume, the amount of TV news channels that there are, the amount of avenues an individual has in order to access and consume information. And unfortunately, one of these accesses is a gentleman like Major Gaurav Arya, who knows little but apparently has a lot of more voice on social media than all of us put together. These are one of the unfortunate truths of our times. But another thing which also tells us is the obsession of the media in order to create a symmetry and a false symmetry, right? I mean, shades of gray have disappeared from media stories. It all has to be between good, bad, occupier, occupied. But the narrative or the symmetry between the occupier and occupied are blurred, and they can be turned very easily. In 2008, there was a research done from the University of Syracuse, if I remember it correctly, if I remember the year correctly, and they covered the BBC's coverage of the Israel-Palestine conflict, and the gentleman who presented the research is a very brilliant paper. He said, forget what is being covered. The way the information is being produced in the newsroom, that is where the brilliance or that is where the magic happens. The editorial, while it may claim to be impartial, but the editorial must subject itself to international political realities and to social biases which are already pre-existing within British society. Acha. Now, having said this, one must also look at how somebody like, let's say, somebody like Al Jazeera is responding to this. Now, traditionally, I would say that Al Jazeera takes, or at least tries to take, a standpoint which is against the whole Western narrative. It has tried to do that in a few instances. But in this one context, I see Al Jazeera taking a Washington Post kind of a position on this. I wouldn't call it neutral, but it is trying to go towards that. But I also feel that it is not the editorial's position. It is also the position of what is the geopolitics that is happening in that part of the world. Israel normalizing ties with Saudi Arabia has an effect on editorial policies of newsrooms which come from these part of the greater Arabic world. I mean, that is my assumption, and that is essentially to a degree my assertion as well. That the fact when Israel and Saudi Arabia tries to normalize those relationships, the fact that Hamas gained a lot of prominence and a lot of traction because of its renewed relationship with Iran, also sort of propels these stories as well. Now, coming back to our own shows within the country as to how the media is covering it. Well, I suppose the gentleman who spoke before me had made a very brilliant point to the fact that we do have a natural tendency, or the media does have a natural tendency of succumbing to the pressures of the disposition presently. I mean, what is happening with NewsClick, The Wire, News Laundry, etc. Nobody wants that. No newsroom, no thinking newsroom would want that. And it is also reflective within the coverage of the Israel-Palestine conflict as well. For instance, a very, very, very recent example would be the white phosphorus use. The white phosphorus which has been used by Israel. None of the Indian outlets have been doing an extensive story on it. Whereas, if you look at, I guess, the Human Rights Watch, the National Human Rights Watch website has written a whole article on this, I believe, in the last 2 days. It is a very extensive article about why Israel shouldn't be using it, about what are the repercussions of using it, and why does it qualify as a human rights violation. None of the Indian news channels have picked it up because it does not serve the editorial purpose. Because, and also, by the way, because the audience also likes to be fed what it already believes. Because the audience is not living in a vacuum. And going by the Edward Bernays theory, I would say that the majority of the audience is sheep. They're looking for a shepherd, and they would like to be fed grass. And you want, and unfortunately, it is the media tradition that we live in, that you would want an anchor who shouts at the top of their voice, reconfirming and affirming their biases. And of course, there is a Modi angle to it. Somehow, somewhere, the Prime Minister will come and save this. I mean, it is very surprising to me that somebody like a Suraj Chauhange of Sudarshan TV has still not realized that Gaza has still not covered a headline with an absolute ludicrous wordings like Hamas has not attacked India because of Modi or something. But I will not be surprised that it happens in TV channels like Sudarshan News, etc. In more regional channels, by the way, in more regional channels. But yes, that is the way I see the Indian media's coverage at this point.
Okay. So I will bring Maitida here. Maitida, you have been covering this issue for a long time. You are someone who is associated with lots of movement. How do you see the role of Victoria Derbyshire? Victoria Derbyshire, I think, is the only white woman journalist who is taking the attack to the Israeli contingency who are appearing on TV shows. Unmute.
Which name did you mention?
Victoria Derbyshire. Victoria Derbyshire.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, she is taking the attack to the Israeli people, and
not really. There are others also. It's not really that Victoria Derbyshire's name might have, because of some algorithm, come up to you. There are several other journalists in the West who have, in the past, done extensive and very hard-hitting reportage as well as commentary on the issues throughout the ages, right? I just on the top of my head, I'll come up with a name which is not very familiar with most Indian audiences, Alastair Cook. You should watch his recent interview on which is available on YouTube, which was uploaded about 2-3 days ago, right? There are the famous names, of course. The point is not that. There are all sorts of other things happening. First of all, the old resolute voices, they have either superannuated or they have been pushed out. Lot of data that too has happened, and it is in the West. And now the problem is of a different kind, because ultimately social media has become the gateway through which we consume news.
Mm.
And so social media acts as a gatekeeper, and because of that, a lot of the stuff that we get to see depends on their filters and algorithms. It is not in our hands anymore. Keep that in mind. And I'll just pick up on a little bit on what Arjun said. I think he wanted to elaborate on it and then kind of moved away. So the idea is that in the era of information overload, right? What happens with most people, even if they self belief that they have a very open mind, what happens is that they will latch on to the first explanation that hits them, and then it creates the original bias in them. So anything subsequent that comes up to them, they are going to ignore. I just saw this whole thing play out over the last 3 days. This whole, 400 Israeli babies, no, 40 Israeli babies beheaded
Mm.
story,
Mm.
the way the Western media has covered it and the Indian media has picked up from there, including so-called liberals like Barkha Dutt and all that. Now, what has happened is it hit the unsuspecting audience like a tsunami wave. Now, once it has hit, it has formed the basis of his or her subsequent, approach to further information. So even after you are shown that the White House itself has retracted its statement, they won't believe it. And
Mm.
mind you, this is how it also works in the Hindu sphere as well. So all kinds of narratives on Nehru and all that, you can, first of all, it takes more time to debunk than to spread lies. Now, even after you have debunked, and you have debunked several times, you will find that the same person comes back again and again with the same lie, and he or she need not be part of the political establishment. The problem is that initial information that reached him or her, that has formed the core conviction for all subsequent interactions. And the modern states understand this very well. So when they are spreading lies, it is not because of out of good faith, it is always out of bad faith. That is my rule of thumb. They are doing it on purpose. If they are telling
Okay.
lies, they are doing it on purpose. There is no
Okay.
use of their withdrawing from it later on.
Yeah, understood. So as I was listening to Arjunda, and I started thinking about ethnic democracy model that the Israel use. Now I think we can safely say that Israel is now using an ethnic media model, where Al Jazeera is trying to take a soft stand towards Israel, and trying to punch down on the Palestinian resistance that is happening, even though the nature of the resistance is problematic, and we see that three Muslim journalists, prominent faces, have been kicked out by their media outlets. One such important name that the Indian audience is familiar is Mehdi Hassan, who had written in 2018 that Hamas is a Israeli entity, and it was curated by Sharon Ariel and all those things. Yeah, Maitida will come into this scheme. At the same time, Maitida, now if you look at this, we are looking at an extreme form of colonialism, and this extreme form of colonialism is there in the Manipur issue also. In Manipur issue also, we see fake instances of that the Meitei women have been raped and killed. Something this was spread, and this resulted in quote unquote the revenge rape of the Kuki woman. The video that has gone viral. It is part of. It shows that in full detail. So I like to bring Maitida here. Then we'll go to Devrada, and lastly we'll end with Orjunda.
Uh, you know, do you have a clear question? Because see, Manipur, of course, we can bring in, but then that itself becomes a big topic.
Yeah, it becomes a big topic, but if we look at it, then it's the
See, the
same thing
model,
that is happening.
I agree with you. I am totally on page with you on the idea that the model is the same. So there is no fight over it. That is how it works. And see, it is first of all right wing dispensations across the world right now, they are constantly benchmarking against each other. So if you see something happening here in India, which looks like a reflection of what happened in Israel or Hungary or Brazil, there is nothing to be surprised. My personal interest in Israel and Palestine issue, it started from 1988.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, Maidida.
But
Sorry to cut you off, Maidida. The actual reason why I bought this is because Narendra Modi here is the fulcrum. Narendra Modi, it took him 9 hours to speak against Hamas and speak for Israel, but it took him more than 90 days to acknowledge what has happened, and till date there hasn't been anything done by the Indian government to look at the Manipur issue. So that is why since we are discussing an intersectionality of Hindutva and
no,
Zionism, I think we can discuss this intersectionality.
no, that is a simple explanation for it, which is that the Indian government would only react as it did in the case of the single video that came out of those two Zo women who were stripped naked. That is the only time the Indian government reacted to it. If there are issues that the Indian government does not want to address in public, it will not address in public. It will try to bide its time because it knows that in the current environment it can always launch a diversionary story and take the attention of the people away to something else, and it will try to do that. Only if it fails in doing that will it then go to address. So Manipur, that was one instance when it was just impossible for the government to respond, not to respond, to keep quiet. So even then, Modi, Shah, none of them responded. They had a minion to take charge of it for a few days till the news environment was filled with something else to distract. So this is their standard model, and all of this is taken largely from Israeli Hasbara, which is
Okay.
a sophisticated Israeli propaganda technique that started being observed by neutrals since the 80s, but which weighs heavily from the 60s CIA PSYOPs manuals. Right. So
Okay.
only thing is that the Israeli Hasbara is just like the Israeli society, which is a very Spartan society in the sense that every member, every citizen is also has served in the IDF, right? So and they are trained that way. Similarly, from school times, all of them are trained in Hasbara, and part of that Hasbara is that you, as an Israeli, have to consider that you are under attack from the whole world. So it is your duty. You, as an individual, are a representative of your government, and it is your duty to convince all outsiders of the government narrative and to cover up any wrongdoings of the government that others point out to you. And so you become like a sleeper cell. You do it automatically. Now, does that sound familiar? This is what all your these podcasters spewing all kinds of fake history that you find strewn all over social media in India nowadays.
True,
Same
true,
thing.
true, 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 true. So no, I like to bring Debrai here. Debrai is someone who is associated with a party, and the party we are talking about is CPIM. CPIM has always had a two-pronged strategy. They support the two-state solution, which many here, I think, Maitida doesn't support. But the BJP, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, at one point, he was against Israel and he supported the Arabs. But right now, Modi supports Israel, but the Indian government has again given a statement in favor of Palestine. What is your take on this? Please make it short.
Yeah, the my take on this is I have already expressed this on social media that Modi is like another angle of Modi is like he is acting as an agent of uh, like the Gautam Adani group. And recently, Gautam Adani in February has got a contract for the renovation and upgradation of the Haifa port in Israel. And so he is like jumping his gun and like is all over the place supporting Israel and condemning the Hamas. And it took about the Indian Ministry of External Affairs took about 2-3 days to come up with its official position, which was absolutely 180-degree opposite to what Modi had said earlier. It stressed on that we stand with the two-state solution and we recognize the existence of a free and independent Palestine. The most important point is that whatever the argument, like Modi said, is that this I have stressed once again that in Israel, when Hamas kills any Israeli citizen, if they are not 18 years old, you cannot call them civilians. You cannot call them innocents because in Israel, for every citizen serving in the IDF is mandatory for a few years. So every Israeli citizen is a trained combatant, whether in active service or not. Either you can use the term active combatant or an ex-combatant. You cannot say he is a civilian. He is trained. He is brainwashed by the Israeli state as a military person to as a representative of the state of Israel, and he's trained in combat in Krav Maga and whatnot. So, but when they are saying that Hamas has attacked and launched an attack and killed Israeli civilians, innocents, and whatnot, that is one of the farces. And then the next farce is they are keeping absolute radio silence when the same thing is done in like 10 times over or 100 times over, Israel being the hugely disproportionately large military force and powerful nation doing on Palestine. And Israel has till date not even recognized the Palestine as a legitimate state. It is one of the big factors differentiating Indian position with the Israeli position is that Israel does not recognize the existence of Palestine. They claim the entire land to be the land of Israel. They don't believe in the two-state solution. And that comes with like few of the Western nations, which we call the um, world at large.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, understood. So now let's go to Arjun because I have to wrap up. Yeah. So Arjun is here. Arjun works on media and Arjun consumes digital media in a different way. We also have been understanding Zionism and Hindutva and Islamism on Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces and all. So my question to you is, there is a bridge of Islamophobia that is uniting the supporters of Zionism as well as the supporters of Hindutva. How is it going to play in the Indian space as well as against the Palestinians going forward? Is there going to be intersectionality between the Indian Muslims and the Palestinians?
To answer that question as concisely as possible, no, I don't think so. In my opinion, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because I feel that the whole Islamic concept of Ummah is governed by the political realities of our time. And it certainly has played its part. But organizations of Islamic unity, etc., they are also subjected to political realities of our time. A very recent example of this is Saudi Arabia trying to normalize ties with Israel, especially like this. So the Indian Muslim is also governed by its own political realities within its boundaries. Is my point of view on that. Now there are obviously contesting point of views from people who are, let's say, more religiously inclined, and they should be heard as well. But this is the reality within which I reside. That is number one. Number two is going back to the intersectionality between Islamophobia and the rule. Now the thing is, the editorial in this. You know what? Let me give this to you with a very recent example, which has happened today in Manipur, because this whole conversation began with Manipur. There is a strike going on in Manipur today from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening, which is being called by the coordinating committee, which is a conglomerate of 5 banned organizations in Manipur, including the United National Liberation Front, against the integration of Manipur with the Union of India. This is happening today in the present scenario, right? I have seen no major news reports since the morning. Some of the electronic mediums have covered it, but this strike, which is being called by banned outfits, is not national news, because the Manipur issue has been ignored by and large for a long time, because the Prime Minister wishes for it to play out at its own pace. With the disintegration of the Soviet Union, it was absolutely evident that the role of the non-state actor would be much more prominent within the nation state. Amnesty International's cropped up. The so-called militant organizations also cropped up. They are both non-state actors, but with different point of views and different ends. But they are non-state actors. They gained a lot of relevance, but the states slowly realized that they must be kept in check. But the Honorable Prime Minister, in this case, for some reason, it realized that the Manipur issue is going to play out in its own due course, and these old skeletons from the closet were not going to prop up. In fact, when this issue began at the very beginning, I believe I made a tweet when the Manipur issue sort of began, that there is a possibility that some old skeletons in the closet, including the United Liberation National Front, PRIPAC, ULFA, all of these groups, there is a possibility that they can turn up and come back into social discourse. Which is usually happening. And the media is by and large ignoring it, because, again, Islamophobia is a bigger, Islam is in itself, be that pro-Islam, be that Islamophobia, it is a bigger business model. It is a bigger business model which has been propagated to the wider audience by the Western media. And it is profitable. It is profitable. So you'll have Indian houses harping about it. And because of this, the Indian Muslim also goes into this wider spiral of silence, because of which it has a harder time expressing its opinion on the Palestine. And the thing is, the opinions on Palestine are so hard-lined right now, even if you have a nuanced view that you dislike Hamas, but at the same time, the fact that you can dislike Hamas and at the same time you also have the authority to dislike the Israeli disposition is something which is bereft of public consciousness. It is very hard for people to understand that both things can happen at the same time. So, yes, the problem with this intersectionality will exist. The media ownership model is to blame for this to a great degree. This also gives a rise to misinformation as well, because people want to know, because people are, if not consciously, subconsciously, they believe that there is always the other side to a story. There's always the other side. I mean, it is also a byproduct of the post-truth world, but there is always the other side. So it depends. But the only thing which is essentially a bit problematic, in my opinion, is credibility. Like, how does information gain credibility, right? I mean, as long as there is no media literacy programs which is being run by the greater citizens of this country, anything and everything told to you with a straight face, wearing a shirt and a tie from an audience, or with good editing, automatically gains credibility. So yeah, those are my closing comments.
True. Thank you, all of you, for being part of this lecture, or part of this media panel. I would like to see it as lecture, because I haven't been able to address one point of misinformation that has been projected against the Indian Muslim to reduce the solidarity for the Kuki Zomis. That is, there is one particular community, that is the Bnei Minashi, that is the Kuki Jews. These people came from outside. They got into the Kuki society and they started incorporating the culture of the cookies. Now, these people are Zionists and these people are Israelites. They have nothing to do with the cookie zombis that are getting killed by the Métis. But still, this fact is being utilized in digital media and elsewhere to make the cookie zombie stand for their self-determination within the Indian framework problematic. That is how that is being projected. So thank you all for coming on this platform. Please watch DYNT News and subscribe to our channel. DYNT, Democratize the Nation Today, awaken one human at a time. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.